The tiny alien shivered, her delicate frame trembling under the cold metal of the station floor. She was no taller than a human's knee, and yet her presence was sharp, alert, and almost impossible to ignore. Her skin was pale green with faint glimmers of silver that caught the dim light, and her wide eyes reflected both fear and intelligence. The station had never been meant for her kind. It was built for humans, for engineers like Alex, and every surface seemed designed to remind her of how small and fragile she was. Alex noticed her immediately. He had been working on the cooling systems in the station's maintenance wing when he caught sight of movement out of the corner of his eye. At first, he thought it was a trick of the light, a shadow dancing across the walls, but then he saw the tiny alien crouched near one of the heat vents. Her body curled into itself, shaking. He walked closer, careful not to startle her. "Hey, little one," he said softly, his voice echoing slightly in the metallic hall. "Are you okay?" The alien looked up at him, her eyes wide and searching. She tilted her head, as if weighing whether to trust him. Then she made a small, high-pitched sound and gestured toward her chest, shivering again. Alex understood immediately. She was cold. He knelt down to get closer to her level, careful not to make any sudden movements. "Okay, I see," he murmured. "You're freezing. We'll fix that." The alien's gestures became more deliberate. She pointed toward the heating vents, then mimed rubbing herself for warmth. Alex nodded slowly. She was clever, noticing the connection between the heat source and comfort. But she was also too small to reach the controls, and the vents were off limits to anything not human-sized. Alex considered his options. The station was a cold place for her species, but there were regulations about tampering with the environmental systems. He didn't care. Survival came first. "All right," he said. "Let's see what we can do." He guided her toward a smaller maintenance panel, one he could open without triggering alarms. As he worked, the alien watched him closely, tilting her head, her eyes following every movement of his hands. Then, as if an idea struck her, she reached out with one tiny hand and tapped the panel. Sparks danced briefly from the wires she touched, and Alex yelped, stepping back. "Careful!" he exclaimed, but he was impressed. She wasn't just surviving, she was experimenting, learning quickly from observation. The tiny alien tilted her head, almost in apology, and then tried again. This time, she managed to redirect a small current toward a heating pad Alex had brought for emergencies. Her small body vibrated as the pad began to warm, and she pressed herself against it, letting out a tiny sigh of relief. Alex couldn't help but smile. "You've got clever hands," he said. "I think you might be smarter than some of the humans around here." The alien's ears, or what Alex assumed were ears, twitched. She seemed to understand his words, or at least the tone. She didn't respond with sound, but instead gestured toward the vent again, and then toward the pad. It was clear she wanted more warmth, and she had an idea about how to get it. Over the next few hours, Alex observed her. She was energetic and curious, testing every method she could imagine to keep warm. She tried curling into herself, hopping from one foot to another, rubbing her tiny limbs, even climbing the walls of the station to catch patches of sunlight that filtered through the observation windows. Nothing worked completely, but she never gave up. Alex found himself fascinated. She wasn't helpless. She was resourceful, clever, and determined. Her movements were precise, her thinking quick. Every small failure seemed to teach her something new. By the time he had finished repairing the maintenance panel, she had already begun experimenting with the station's small energy conduits, running her hands along the edges and tapping at the switches. "What are you doing?" Alex asked, curious. The alien tilted her head and made a series of high-pitched sounds, pointing to herself and then to the conduit. He frowned. It took a moment, but he realized she was trying to generate heat using the station's energy systems. You want to make your own warmth? He asked. She nodded vigorously. Alex watched as she carefully manipulated the tiny mechanisms she could reach, climbing over small cables and levers. Sparks flew occasionally and the lights flickered, but she didn't falter. She was clearly thinking, testing, learning from every small mistake. Finally, after several attempts, she managed to redirect a small amount of energy into a tiny field around herself. The air around her shimmered slightly, and a warm glow radiated from the spot where she sat. She pressed herself into it, shivering less now, her body relaxing for the first time since he had found her. Alex couldn't hide his amazement. "That's incredible," he whispered. "You did that all on your own?" The tiny alien's eyes sparkled. She didn't answer, but her pride was evident in the way she lifted her head and gestured toward the glowing field. She had solved a problem that most humans wouldn't even attempt, and she had done it with creativity and intelligence that was rare in any species. As the hours passed, Alex continued to observe her. He brought her small pieces of equipment and let her experiment, fascinated by her inventiveness. She learned quickly, improvising ways to manipulate the station's energy without causing harm. Every flicker of light, every small burst of warmth, was a lesson in resilience and cleverness. For Alex, it was a reminder of what humanity often overlooked. Intelligence and capability could come in the smallest forms. Strength was not always measured in size or power, but in creativity, determination, and the ability to adapt. This tiny alien, shivering and fragile, embodied all of those qualities. As the day drew to a close, Alex sat back and watched her. She was comfortable now, sitting in her tiny field of warmth, her eyes alert, and her mind clearly already thinking of the next experiment. He felt a deep respect for her, more than he had ever felt for any human colleague. "You're amazing," he said quietly. The alien tilted her head, blinking slowly, and then pressed a tiny hand to her chest as if to acknowledge his words. Alex smiled. She was beginning to understand human gestures, just as he was learning to understand her methods. The station hummed quietly around them, the metallic walls reflecting the glow of the tiny field of warmth she had created. Alex realized that this moment was rare, a connection between species that went beyond survival. It was a shared understanding, a recognition of intelligence and ingenuity in the face of adversity. For the tiny alien, it was a first victory. She had survived the cold, adapted to an alien environment, and even managed to manipulate technology far beyond what her size should allow. But Alex knew this was only the beginning. Her cleverness would not stop at warmth. Soon she would begin testing other systems, finding ways to interact with the station that no one had anticipated. And when she did, Alex knew humanity would see the value of respecting and learning from even the smallest and most unexpected beings. As he watched her settle into her warm spot, he felt a surge of hope. The tiny alien was not just surviving, she was thriving, learning, and adapting. And in her shivering, struggling, inventive ways, she had already begun to teach him something profound about intelligence, determination, and the unexpected power that could come in the smallest packages. Alex glanced at her one more time before standing to leave for his own quarters. She looked up at him, her eyes bright, her tiny body no longer shaking but alert and curious. He smiled and nodded, a silent promise that he would continue to protect her, support her, and perhaps even learn from her. The tiny alien had shivered at first, vulnerable and fragile, but she had found a way to survive, and in doing so she had shown the ingenuity and cunning that would make her an invaluable ally. Alex left her with a sense of awe and anticipation, knowing that tomorrow would bring new experiments, new challenges, and new lessons that neither of them could yet imagine. And as the lights dimmed and the station settled into quiet hums of machinery, The tiny alien pressed her hands to the warm field she had created, her mind already working on the next clever trick, the next method of survival, and the next way to astonish the human who had first noticed her trembling in the cold. The tiny alien moved with purpose now, her small feet pattering softly across the station floor. She had mastered the basic warmth she needed to survive, but her curiosity was far from satisfied. Every panel, every wire, every flicker of light in the station seemed to call to her, inviting her to explore, test, and invent. Alex watched her closely, fascinated by the energy and ingenuity she displayed. "You've got quite the mind, you know that?" he said, crouching beside her. "Most humans couldn't figure out what you just did." The alien, Lyra, tilted her head at him, her wide eyes reflecting both mischief and intelligence. She made a series of sounds, higher than Alex could understand, but the tone was clear. She was acknowledging his words, and perhaps even challenging him in her own way. Alex smiled and shook his head. He had never met anyone like her. Tiny as she was, her ideas were big, far beyond what anyone expected from a being her size. She reminded him of a prodigy, someone who could see connections and solutions that the rest of the world overlooked. For the next few hours, Lyra began experimenting with other systems in the station. The small energy conduits she had discovered were only the beginning. She tapped at the lights, carefully observing the effects. Some flickered, some glowed brighter, and some responded in ways Alex hadn't anticipated. She was learning quickly, adapting her methods with every small success and failure. Alex noticed something remarkable. She wasn't just exploring for survival anymore. She was strategizing, thinking several steps ahead. She tested combinations of energy flows, watched how the machines responded, and adjusted her actions accordingly. Her mind was sharp, precise, and surprisingly bold. "You're like a tiny engineer," Alex said, leaning against a wall to watch her work. "But you're better than most humans I've trained." Lyra tilted her head again, and for a moment, Alex could swear she smiled. She had begun to understand him, not just in gestures, but in the tone of his voice, the intent behind his words. And in a way only someone truly intelligent could. She seemed to be enjoying the praise. Over the next few days, Alex and Lyra developed an unspoken partnership. He would bring her small tools, components, and devices that were safe for her to handle, and she would experiment, creating small systems that amazed him with their efficiency. She rigged a small fan system to circulate warm air toward her tiny living area, using parts that no human would have thought to connect in such a clever way. She even managed to create a tiny light system powered by kinetic energy, harvesting her own movement to generate electricity. Alex realized she was teaching him something important. He had always thought of humans as the smartest species in the galaxy, but Lyra challenged that assumption. She was a reminder that intelligence could take many forms, and that the universe was full of beings capable of ingenuity beyond human imagination. One day, as he watched her working on a small heating coil, Lyra paused and looked at him. She gestured toward the observation window, and then to herself. Alex frowned, unsure what she meant. "You want to go outside?" he asked. "You know the station isn't safe for you." She nodded, then tapped the heating coil, indicating she could maintain her own warmth now. Alex considered it. It was risky, but he also knew he couldn't keep her cooped up forever. She needed freedom, just as much as she needed warmth and food. "All right," he said finally. "We'll try, but carefully. Stay close to me." They moved toward the exit, and Lyra followed Alex closely. She was small, but her movements were swift and precise. Every step she took seemed calculated, as if she had already considered every possible obstacle. Alex couldn't help but admire her. Despite her size, she carried herself with confidence and determination. Once outside the main station, the temperature difference was immediately noticeable. The outside air was colder, harsher, and more dangerous than the controlled environment inside. Lyra shivered for a moment, but then she pressed her tiny hands together, her body glowing faintly as the energy system she had devised activated. Warmth spread around her, and she looked up at Alex with a sparkle of triumph in her eyes. "You did it," Alex said, genuinely impressed. "You're ready for this." Lyra didn't respond with words, but her movements were confident and deliberate. She began exploring the exterior of the station, climbing over small structural beams, testing the limits of her new abilities. Alex followed closely, keeping a careful watch on her. Every time she reached a high point or discovered something new, her eyes would light up with excitement, and he felt a sense of pride he hadn't expected. Over the next several hours, they explored together. Lyra tested small solar panels, experimented with energy absorbers, and even managed to reroute power to emergency lighting systems, all without causing harm. Alex was astonished. She had not only adapted to the station, but she was improving it in ways that no human engineer had anticipated. By evening, they returned inside. Lyra curled up in her warm area, her energy systems glowing softly. Alex watched her, feeling a sense of awe. This tiny alien, fragile and small, had become a partner in innovation, a being whose intelligence and creativity could match any human engineer. "You're amazing, you know that?" he said quietly. "You've done more in a week than most humans would manage in a lifetime." Lyra tilted her head, and this time she made a sound that seemed like laughter. Alex laughed softly in return. Despite the differences between them, despite the vast gap in size and species, there was a connection, a mutual understanding, respect, and shared curiosity about the world. Days turned into weeks, and Lyra continued to astonish everyone on the station. Her inventions became more complex, her strategies more sophisticated. Alex introduced her to other engineers who were initially skeptical of working with such a small alien. But one by one, they were convinced by her ingenuity and adaptability. She rigged small power converters, improved ventilation systems, and even designed miniature safety mechanisms that could prevent accidents in places humans couldn't easily reach. Every success built upon the last, and the humans began to see the value in collaboration. Alex often found himself marveling at her resourcefulness. She didn't rely on brute strength or size. She relied on observation, clever thinking, and precise action. Her shivering, which had once seemed like a sign of weakness, had been the spark for all of her ingenuity. The need to survive had driven her to invent, and the results were extraordinary. One evening, Alex watched as she activated a tiny energy shield around her living area, a protective dome that not only kept her warm but also isolated her from minor hazards. He realized she was no longer just an alien guest in the station. She was a contributor, a problem solver, and a symbol of what could be achieved when intelligence and creativity were respected, no matter the size of the being. "You've come a long way," he said, sitting beside her, "and we've learned a lot from you, too." Lyra looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the warm glow of her energy field. She made a sound that was almost musical, a note of satisfaction and acknowledgement. Alex understood it as clearly as any words. She was proud, not just of surviving, but of thriving, of proving that even the smallest and seemingly weakest beings could achieve remarkable things. Over the next few days, Lyra and Alex worked together on a larger project, improving the station's emergency systems. Lyra's small size allowed her to access areas no human could reach, and her quick thinking helped reroute power, strengthen barriers, and create redundancies that would keep everyone safe. Alex provided the knowledge of human engineering, but Lyra provided the creativity, the ability to think outside the box, and the courage to experiment. By the end of their work, the station was safer, more efficient, and better equipped to handle emergencies than ever before. And all the while, Lyra had continued to keep herself warm, her ingenious methods now fully integrated into her daily life. She no longer shivered in fear or discomfort. She moved confidently, aware of her abilities and proud of what she had accomplished. Alex often reflected on the lessons she had taught him. Intelligence and courage were not always obvious. Strength was not measured by size or appearance, but by determination, creativity, and the willingness to take risks to solve problems. Lyra embodied all of these qualities, and in doing so, she had earned the respect and admiration of everyone around her. One quiet evening, as the station hummed softly and lights glowed around them, Alex watched Lyra activate a tiny power conduit that sent warmth to a previously cold corner of the station. She looked up at him, eyes sparkling with pride, and for the first time, he realized the full extent of her impact. She had not only survived in a hostile environment, but she had improved it, changed it, and inspired the humans around her. "You've done it," he whispered. "You've shown everyone what it means to be clever, resourceful, and brave." Lyra tilted her head, making a series of soft sounds, and then pressed a tiny hand to her chest. Alex smiled. She didn't need words. Her actions had already spoken volumes. In the weeks that followed, she continued to explore, invent, and collaborate. Every day brought new discoveries, new challenges, and new ways to demonstrate her remarkable intelligence. And though she was small, fragile, and alien, she had proven something powerful, that even the tiniest beings could achieve greatness, that ingenuity and determination could overcome any obstacle, and that respect for intelligence, no matter the source, was a value humanity could embrace. By the time Alex looked around the station, he realized something extraordinary. The tiny alien who had shivered so desperately when he first found her had become a symbol of brilliance, courage, and ingenuity. Her cleverness had not only kept her alive, but had made the station better, safer, and more efficient. And in the process, she had reminded humans that even the smallest and most unexpected allies could teach them something profound about intelligence, creativity, and the courage to survive. Lyra pressed her hands to the warmth she had generated, eyes shining with satisfaction. She had survived the cold. She had thrived. And she had done so with cleverness, ingenuity, and determination that no one could ignore. Alex watched her, feeling proud, humbled, and inspired. In the tiny alien's struggle to stay warm, he had seen something greater. The brilliance of a mind that refused to be limited by size, species, or circumstance. A mind that had shown humanity a new measure of respect for intelligence, creativity, and courage. And so, in the quiet hum of the station, with the soft glow of her warmth surrounding her, Lyra settled in, no longer trembling, no longer afraid, and no longer small in the eyes of those who had witnessed her remarkable journey. She had become a partner, a teacher, and a reminder that greatness could come in even the tiniest of forms, and that ingenuity, determination, and courage were the true measures of strength in any universe.